Hello, and thank you for joining us in Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
I'm Lincoln L.Hayes. This week we're discussing John Ford's Stagecoach from 1939, starring the great John Wayne. Why did you add this on at what would have been the end of this season?
So we've done The Quiet Man.
Yes.
We've done The Searchers. And I wanted to bring it back and kind of, this is like the great American film. So 1939, Stagecoach by John Ford. It's his first sound Western. It is his first movie with John Wayne. And it can be said that it is, you know, Westerns before Stagecoach were, you know, there were B, C, maybe even D movies where it was just you go in, you pay your nickel, and you see some old cowboys and Indians type thing. And this was the first Western that came about. It was like, nope, it can be something more. As many people say that superhero movies are now what Westerns were back then, superhero movies are now, and kind of like, depending on where you're at, either Iron Man or The Dark Knight was like that one time where like a movie came out and said, nope, it's not just your, we're gonna strive for something else, and we're gonna make a B movie an A movie. And that's what John Ford did with the Western, with Stagecoach.
This is the same year as Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. Surprisingly, this is not directed by Victor Fleming because, you know, he directs everything.
He got out of that one.
This, if you've never seen this film before, you have seen this film before because everybody has aped this. Tarantino has. I mean, Shaun of the Dead is even it a little bit. Dawn of the Dead. Anytime that there's a group of people trying to go from one place to another place and they are beleaguered and besieged their whole way, it's Stagecoach.
It's as much a road movie as The Wizard of Oz is a road movie. And yeah, I mean, everything. Like, you know, I mentioned before that like The Wizard of Oz is almost like a textbook in terms of if you know what makes The Wizard of Oz work, you can structure your own screenplay. Because it's just, you know, what do I need to do in this scene? Well, let's look at what they did in The Wizard of Oz during this moment, and you can figure out what you need to do. The same thing can be said for this. You know, it is so perfectly constructed. And just making it's such a great conceit for a film where you have this stagecoach that has to get from point A to point B, and it's used as a vehicle to introduce a number of different characters, and you can put any type of, you know, whatever is going on in the world, whatever is making you tick, you can put into those characters, and then all of a sudden, like, that's your movie.
So much so that there's a line in this film that I wrote down because it happened in this very election. Mr. Bankman from Wells Fargo, who's angry about all the things that are going on, who's stolen money and trying to get away, he has the line, "What this country needs is a businessman for president." 1939. And then they did it, and look where we are now. But I was just like, record scratch, pause, write it down. That's nuts. Because the film is not saying that that is the case. He is one of the villains of this piece. So even in 39, I knew it was a bad idea. Anyway, we got a really solid cast in this too, featuring obviously John Wayne, but also our buddy Thomas Mitchell from It's a Wonderful Life, and also the man who voiced Friar Tuck in Disney's Robin Hood, which as soon as I heard it, I was like, I thought it was Phil Harris for a second.
Unmistakable.
And I was like, nope, that's not Baloo, that's Friar Tuck. And he got the job because he knew how to drive 6 horses. And the guy that Ford wanted couldn't. So he's like, well, I get it. My job. It's an education in what a stagecoach was as well. And what later, you know, something like the Titanic would be as well. The purpose of a stagecoach was to deliver mail and to deliver, you know, money to banks and things like that. But at the same time, well, let's throw some people in here and make some extra money. And that's essentially what the Titanic was. It was supposed to be to deliver mail. That was its main purpose. And then they threw a bunch of people in it, and then they crashed into an iceberg, and 1,000 people died. But if you didn't know that going into it, that was kind of like, oh, okay, that's neat. Why is he sitting on the cash box? Oh, because that's the whole point. That's why you have someone riding shotgun, because they literally have a shotgun to defend you, and now you call that when you get into your car.
And that is why.
The more you know.
When I first saw this movie, my first year in college, I took an American genres class, and it was westerns, musicals, and romantic comedies. And for the western piece of it, he started with Stagecoach. And for me, I was, I had already seen The Searchers, so I knew that I couldn't really say I don't like westerns.
Right.
But that's what I kind of grew up saying because my father liked westerns, I like monster movies, blah, blah, blah. Mentioned it here many times.
Hi, Charles.
So watching this movie, like that first moment was, what I said when the movie was over was, hey, that's Speed. That's the bus.
Yeah.
With all the people inside.
Yep.
And it kind of blew my mind where it was like, even someone who says that they don't like westerns or wasn't looking forward to sitting down and watching this movie, that I was able to see how it has influenced so many things.
The tropes are all there. Like
This
is the prototype for any kind of chase movie, escape movie, bottle movie of just people stuck together trying to overcome something. Like you can see its influences just like spider web out into cinema.
And even with both Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, it's amazing to see in 1939 just how well made it is and how, even though it is 1939, it ages quite well.
Oh yeah.
Like
it doesn't feel that old. It doesn't feel even in the same time frame as Wizard of Oz, because that is as wonderful as it is. That's incredibly dated. Like you can tell that is an old movie. So much so that they made it sepia tone, then added the Technicolor to make it pop and all that other stuff. But it's also timeless, and that's something that I adore about westerns. Is that you could have a western that's made in '39, you could have a western that's made in the '60s. They both feel like they're in the same universe. Like this and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly could exist in the same territories. This one's a little bit less gritty and kind of pessimistic, but you could definitely see these characters interacting with each other because it's the Old West and it's timeless.
And they do talk to each other in the sense that like with this movie, John Ford said like, okay, now here's a western.
Yeah.
And then he would go on and he would carry that over into My Darling Clementine. He would carry that over into The Searchers, Fort Apache. It's everything that makes a John Ford movie is in this movie, and you can see it. We talked about this when we talked about Hitchcock. It's like, well, by the time he gets to North by Northwest, he's already made 5 different films that are kind of dealing with the similar themes. Yeah. And he does it here, like he has his moment where a character breaks out into a song. He has his moment where there's this tragic love story that's at one point romantic, but it's handled with such delicacy that you believe it. Like there's never a moment where you're just like, oh, okay, here we go. Now
of course, he proposed to her. He met her yesterday.
Right.
It's all plausible. It all makes complete sense, and then it's got twists and turns and mysteries and all kinds of stuff, and people you think are going to be villains turn out to not be villains, and it's dealing with some big issues like a perpetually drunk physician. That's not great. And we see Doc as like the lovable drunk in the beginning, and he's always got a drink, and he's always happy and jolly and whatever. But then we have the moment in the Stagecoach where he's just fall down drunk. And Mr. Peacock says, please, no, and he just shrugs him off and takes another drink and passes out.
Right.
And it's like, oh, that is the dark side of the lovable drunk, when they're no longer lovable and they're just drunk.
And then we get a moment where, you know, they have to stop and they have to stay the night because they are worried about the Apaches that are going to be coming. And that he has to deliver the baby. It's like, it's
Surprise, baby.
a surprise baby. And that's a moment where it's like, okay, here's how this movie is not like every other Western that we've seen.
Right. There's real fragility, there's frailty to these characters. They're not fodder for the enemy. They're real people trying to get somewhere so they can stay safe. And the fact that she's pregnant, you don't know that until the very second that they're like, hey, we need you to deliver her baby. And you're like,
Right.
that's why she's looking for her husband. That's why, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And it's like a huge reveal that's never even telegraphed. Like, you just think that she's not well, but she's not showing. Like, her clothing is big enough that you can't actually tell what's going on.
Right.
It's genius. I also really appreciated the way that they handled the Dallas character, because they never outright say she's a prostitute,
Right.
or she's a sex worker.
Right.
It's just implied by everyone and ignored by one. And that's I think one of the strengths of this script is all of these people are just hating on her and crapping on her, and then Ringo comes in and he's just like, oh hey, you're pretty,
Right.
I like you. And she's like, what? You can't. I'm a lady of the night. And he's like, I don't know that.
John Wayne.
Fantastic.
I mean,
Almost didn't get the part.
and it's strange because it's like you hear, it almost feels like this is his first Western.
Yeah.
But he made so many. Like,
This was his 80th film.
that's crazy. To the point where,
Yeah.
like, he had to fight and say, no, I want John Wayne in this movie. And everyone said, like, no, anyone can walk down the street and see him in another Western for a nickel. Like,
Yeah.
you can't, like, he's not a star.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that opening shot of him. One, it's like, you know,
The coolest.
one of the greatest, coolest, most awesome character reveals in a movie ever.
Yeah.
But it's almost like John Ford is saying, like, and here's John Wayne as I see him, here's John Wayne, the star.
Forget the John Wayne you knew. Here he is. Here's his Wayne-naissance.
And it's, we've talked about this before, like, it's as much, he is as fully formed here as Jack Nicholson in Easy Rider or Gene Wilder in Bonnie and Clyde. It's like, oh,
Here's a person.
there he is.
Yeah, he exists. We don't need a ton of backstory. It's just the way that the other characters react to him and around him. You're just like, okay, this is just someone I personally haven't met yet. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a complete backstory and a complete life up until now. And I also love that he is a prisoner. That's such a great thing that, you know, John Carpenter has used in different films, and you see it all the time where the group is on their journey, and then they come across someone who is, quote unquote, a bad guy.
Yep.
But he may just have been a wronged bad guy, or he may have done one wrong thing, but not necessarily an out-and-out villain, who then ends up being one of the heroes of the piece, if not the hero of the piece, but then is still willing to pay the price for the crime that he committed. He could very easily just like run off to Mexico, and there's that scene where she's like, well, why don't you just go? And he's like,
Right.
no.
And so we talked before we started recording, we were talking about economical storytelling.
Yeah.
And how you can explain so much with very little.
Yeah.
So there's two instances in this movie. So, I mean, there's many instances in these movies, but two for sure. One is, so he gets onto the stagecoach. We don't know too much about him except that, you know, everyone's been saying his name, and the sheriff who's riding shotgun is obviously looking for him.
Right.
He has this dialogue with the doctor, and then, how's your brother? He was murdered. That's it.
Yeah.
And now you know why why he has it in for this cowboy that he's going to see.
Right. And that's all we need. We don't need this heartfelt, overly melodramatic speech of like, he killed my brother and I am out for vengeance. It's just like, he was murdered.
He murdered, and then you see the look on his face.
Yeah.
And then, you know, he could, like you said, he could very easily escape. Dallas tries, he's making his escape, and he comes to a dead stop.
Yeah.
And then the sheriff comes over, and he's like, you know, trying to get him back, and he's like, no.
Look. Yeah.
War signal. And that says so much about his character, because he could have easily just said, war signal,
I'm out.
I'm out.
Yeah.
But he says, no.
I have to help these people.
Yeah.
Because he's a hero.
Because he's John Wayne. Just something about John Ford, because he's, you know, obviously I adore him, and obviously, like, you know, he's an influence. But the more and more that we have these discussions about him and talk about his movies, and I watch his movies, he's got this reputation as being a very cantankerous, very conservative director.
Yeah.
Which, in some cases, he is. And as he got older, you know, I think what he gets the bad rap for is because that his U.S. Cavalry trilogy. So it starts with Fort Apache, which I actually like, and it kind of stands apart. But with She Wore a Yellow Ribbon and with Rio Grande, they are very conservative, heavy-handed, you know, quote-unquote Republican type movies where it's, you know, it's all about the sanctity of war and warriors and, you know, honor and all that stuff, all that patriotism that we kind of, you know, look at very crookedly now.
Feels a little jingoistic now.
Yes.
Right.
But with this film, like, there's so many idealistic, liberal ideas in this film.
Absolutely.
You know, everyone in this movie, the characters that are supposed to be the ones that are very stand up straight, you know, to be the ones that we're supposed to look up to, are the villains.
Yeah.
And the ones that we're supposed to look down on are the heroes. And that's just a great thing that you can do in a script, but he peppers it with so much, like that line, like what this country needs is a businessman for a president, being said by the guy who is stealing all the money.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a...
There you go, yeah. And then to go on and make those Republican films, as you say, it's a surprising turn for him, it seems.
Well, and I think it was coming. I think his heart was in the right place with those films. I just think, especially going into the time of World War II, and that he went to World War II and he was a war photographer in World War II, and coming back, that's when he makes The Searchers.
Right.
You know, that's when he's like, you know, no, I need to go deeper with this Western.
Because before then, it is America. America, America, America. We're doing good things. We're doing great. Yeah.
Right.
And then once you get out of it and you go abroad, which is why everyone should travel, leave and see other places. Once you get out and you have a new perspective of things, then you're like, whoa. I need, especially as a storyteller and as a filmmaker, then you come back and you're like, what is the heart of what I want to say? And then once you have that, then you can apply any apparatus that you need, and you can tell a great story like The Searchers within the same, you know, Western tropes that everyone knows you for. So it isn't a huge departure, and everybody's not like, "What is he doing?"
Right.
You're changing the conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
To what you want to say within the same framework.
And it's the difference between, you know, with this film, it's like I just want to tell a fun, entertaining Western. Yes, I will have somber moments and deeper moments, but they can only go so far. Yeah. You know, if this film had a scene like in The Searchers where they come upon a genocide, it wouldn't fit.
No, everybody would just be like, "What is that?"
Right. And it wouldn't follow the trajectory of the story he's trying to tell.
And the reason that it wouldn't work, not just because audiences would be like, "Oh, what?" Having them come upon a genocide in this story wouldn't inform any of the characters towards the end of the film.
Right.
Unfortunately, this film does not deal with First Nations people well. And it's a fault of the times, but I guess it doesn't really even paint them as an out-and-out villain, more so as an obstacle.
Right. Well, and I do want to say this about that, is that, yes, it's a product of the time. He's been criticized.
It's criticized for the searchers.
For the searchers.
Yeah.
But it's always about, like, the Native Americans are always the villain. It's like, yeah, but the Apaches are always the villain.
Yeah.
And then he makes it a point, like there's a Cheyenne at the beginning of the film who's giving the Confederacy and the townspeople the information, like saying like Geronimo is coming and the Apaches are coming and blah blah blah.
And they go so far as to say they're also enemies of the Apache.
Right.
So we have a collective enemy now in the
Yes.
West, and they are the Apaches.
So while it's still making Native Americans the villain, yes. I think he did more than any other filmmaker at the time to at least try to draw some lines and say, like, there's, they're not all bad.
Right.
They're not all savages.
Exactly.
And I think, like, when you get to the moment where they stop, and you have the gentleman whose home that they are staying at, and he has a Native American as a wife, there's some tricky stuff there in terms of, him standing up and saying, it's a savage, right? But then you got to look at, well, which character is saying that?
Right.
And what's his character like? He's a very feeble, cowardly type person who would be afraid of something that he didn't know at first sight. But then you get the part where he's looking around and he's like, my wife is gone and I can't just get another one. So
1939. We do the best we can. And that's something that I have really enjoyed about doing this show, is looking at the different decades and seeing the social progress.
Yes.
Because you have stuff like the same year, Gone with the Wind. Also, some progressive stuff. Some not so progressive stuff.
Right.
But you can see how we're getting there. We're working towards something good. And we're not just watching outright racist stuff. So that's a positive for Hollywood and for our show.
But the set pieces in this film, them stopping at that home is a set piece, and there's so many things that happen in there, and like the two that stick out in my mind is, one, the image of her she's walking down that hallway, and then she walks out the door, and John Wayne is just on the left of the frame, leaning against the wall, watching her leave, and then follows her out. It's such a great image, and it says so much, and that is why, like, you look back at this film and you're like, oh, there's the man that made The Searchers, 16 years later.
Yeah.
Or, 26 years later. And then we have the delivery of the baby. And you get to have a moment, to have a film where you have a character who is a drunken physician that then completely redeems himself by giving life.
Yeah.
Right? It's such a profound character moment in a film that's not supposed to have a profound character moment.
It's a profound character moment for not even the lead character.
Right.
Which is kind of insane that, like, who is the lead of this film? Is it Ringo? Because he comes in, I want to say, 18 minutes into the film, but we've been following the Doc since the first scene.
Yep.
So it's almost the Doc and Dallas movie with Ringo thrown in there, because we're following her journey and Doc's journey, and then we add in Ringo's journey. It's a fascinating ensemble.
And it's, and that makes sense that it would be, that he would look at it and say, Well, I guess Ringo is the lead character only because that's the character. As soon as he shows up in the film, it's like, okay, we're with
Focus has shifted.
Ringo. But it makes sense that those three are the three characters that have the most arc, because it really is, at the end of the day, a film about outsiders coming together and just at the end having something good come about for them.
Right.
They've gone through so much. It's really, I mean, it really is about, John Wayne has the line, you know, you can't break out of prison and into society in the same week.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is about the social injustices that we inflict on those that are different than us.
Right.
And that's a heavy thing to have for your Western.
Yeah.
But it's so amazing that a story like that, a theme like that, can hold water in a Western.
Yeah.
Like you can tell whatever story you want within the framework of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's exciting about it.
Because then you satisfy what the people want when you have the big chase scene through the desert where everybody's shooting guns and there's Indians on horseback with their spears and bows and arrows and stuff. And not 3 scenes before that, that drunk guy who's in the back of the wagon shooting and defending these people was so drunk that he couldn't keep his head up. And now he's a hero.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And that, you know, that scene.
The stunt work in this movie is unbelievable. A, because it's 1939, but B, just what they were able to accomplish. And I mean, reading up on, you know, the way the horses were treated in this film is just heartbreaking. But again, it's the 30s and they didn't know any better. And eventually they stopped, so thank God for that.
Right.
But the stuntman for this film doubles John Wayne when he jumps onto the horses and climbs out and does that. He is the Native American who jumps onto the horses and is shot by Ringo and falls under the wagon. All practical, obviously. And he's the one who came up with how to rig the stagecoach to cross that river.
Yep.
Dude's a genius.
Yeah. That is like, so that raid sequence, in the staging of it, the writing of it in terms of what happens within it, like everything about it, it is as amazing as the ending of Fury Road.
Yeah.
You know, you look at that and you're like, oh, that's where it started.
Yeah, that is a perfect parallel. I mean, you can see it in any action movie where we have like a big chase and a bunch of stuff is going on. You can see it in Indiana Jones. When he climbs under the truck and he's got the whip. You know Spielberg stole that from Stagecoach. And he's like, oh, well, instead of him falling out the end, we'll have him tied on so we can stay on there and then he can pull himself back in. Yeah, it's all right there. It's all there on the screen. And there's no wonder in both mentioning that Devin asked what we were watching this week, and I said Stagecoach, and he told me something that was then the first thing listed in IMDb trivia, which is that Orson Welles claimed to have watched this over 40 times in preparation for making Citizen Kane, because he said it's a textbook for how to make a film.
Yep.
And it is. I mean, you have here the BFI, I almost said AFI, no, BFI, Film Classics essay about Stagecoach, which I am going to buy because I want that knowledge in my brain for future filmmaking. You could teach a class on this movie.
Yes.
And you should. There should be a class on John Ford and the American Western and how to tell a story like this.
And with Orson Welles, like, you know, everyone kind of looks at Citizen Kane and says that, you know, it's the first. People sometimes make the claim that Citizen Kane was the first time that we saw ceilings in a film, meaning that the camera angle was so low that, you know, you didn't just see the four walls on either side, you saw the ceiling.
Right.
And you knew that you were in a real location that was built, you know, all around them.
Right.
It's in this movie.
Yeah, there's ceilings in this movie, which when you put that into it and you think about it, they purposely had their sets have ceilings so it would feel claustrophobic, and so all these people would be tight together, because when they're in the stagecoach, they're sitting on top of each other. There's not enough room in that coach for as many people as we have, which any other story, you'd be like, well, just eliminate one of these characters. You have too many characters. Just pare it down a little bit. But then you see something like Hateful Eight, when it's like, or Ocean's 11, or any of these things where you have more than 4 people involved in a plan or scheme or whatever, and it's like, well, as long as each person has something to do, then this is important.
Yes.
And everyone in this story has something to do. Even little old Mr. Peacock with his whiskey samples, he's important. And had this, been a more contemporary movie, I would have assumed that he would be villainous in some way. I was like, oh, I wonder if all of this talk of his wife and his 5 kids is all a lie and he's like a con man or something. No, he's not, because this is 1939 and we got enough going on. We don't need to overcomplicate and make our 7th build have some kind of dark backstory or something like that. But he and Doc, like, this could be a buddy comedy with the 2 of them. Because from the word go, Doc's stealing all the samples and putting scarves on him and wiping the sweat off his face, and like they have this kinship immediately that carries into the end of the film when he's taken away on a gurney.
Right. And that, like, you can almost, there's times where I'm watching the movie where I think, like, I think I know what the conversation was between John Ford and the screenwriter, because at that point in the movie, you're like, okay, the raid is about to begin, the Apaches are coming, one of them needs to get an arrow in the... Right. So, who is that?
Well, it's not going to be the woman who just gave birth.
Right.
It's not going to be the other woman, Dallas, because she's our romantic lead. It can't be John Wayne, because we need him to be a hero. It could have been John Carradine's character, which I'm a little confused about what's going on with him. What's his story?
So
why does he hold the gun up on her at that one point?
So apparently he's a gambler, but I think he has his eyes on her.
Yes.
Right. So there's a villainous thing about him that I think, again, we're talking about, like, what's the conversation between the screenwriter and the director.
Right.
It's like, okay, so what's going to be the big reveal with him? It's like, okay, well, let's make him at the end of the day not as villainous as everyone thinks he is, because he looks villainous.
Yeah, he's got the Errol Flynn mustache.
He's got that chin that sticks out, and everybody wants, we want him to say, we want people to say, there's something going on with him. There's something creepy about him. I don't know what it is.
Right.
But then at the end, it's like, that moment, it's just like, if we're all going to be taken down, I don't want, my love for her is so much that I don't want her taken by the Apaches. Right. So I'm going to sacrifice her. But then, he gets shot by someone.
Somebody's got guns. Bang, bang. He's shot.
And apparently that was a steal from a D.W. Griffith movie, where it was like we think we know what's going to happen. We hear what we think is going to happen. It's not coming from this gun. It's coming from something else. And then the gun falls, and it's like, a very easy moment to show a character dying.
And how many times has that happened since?
Right.
Where I'm going to shoot you. You hear a bang. Indiana Jones, right there. Steven Spielberg, just stealing from John Ford.
Right. But then, so getting back to who gets the arrow?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we want it to be the banker.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's the bad guy, he's the corrupt one.
But that wouldn't be justice.
But that wouldn't be justice. Yeah. And it's like, it's too easy.
Yeah.
Right?
We can't just kill the only bad guy in the company.
So let's have it be the one that we don't want it to be. He's too innocent.
Yeah,
so
you want the reaction to be,
no,
not Mr. Peacock.
Yeah. You want the reaction to be like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so sudden. And it just comes out of nowhere, and that's why it's so effective. That's the catalyst for these people to rally together and to fight.
You know what's funny about that is that, so Robin and I watched this on Sunday, and I've seen this many times. So we get to that point in the movie where I know the attack is about to happen, and I'm like, oh, I think to myself, oh yeah. an arrow, all of a sudden an arrow is going to come and hit one of them.
Yeah.
And before it hits Peabody,
It is Peabody, isn't it?
is it? Did you say Peacock?
Is it Peacock or Peabody?
It's P something.
And that's the joke through the movie. Nobody can remember his name.
Damn. But no, the banker, the corrupt banker. So he's sounding off about something.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, oh, it happens right here because he's sounding off about something, and then it hits him, which is something that happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But no, that didn't happen. Then it hits, and I had the same reaction. I was like,
No.
Yeah.
Not Peacock Body.
So this film works, man.
Yeah.
And with Orson Welles, there's a movie called RKO 281 where it's Liev Schreiber is playing Orson Welles, and it's about the making of Citizen Kane. But they have a scene in there where he's sitting in a screening room with Greg Toland, the cinematographer, and they're watching Stagecoach, and the joke is, so he turns back and he's like, run it again, and Greg Toland's like, again? And he's like, yeah. And he runs it again, and he's like, what lens is that? What lens is that? What lens is that? And it's just a cool way just to sit down and just learn about filmmaking.
Yeah.
Because that's what he had to do. Like I know plays, I know radio.
Right.
Here's my first movie. I want it to be
good.
a movie.
Yeah. So look at the best. And it's insane that, I mean, what a stacked year that this comes out. And it's like, he's nominated for Best Director, but he doesn't win because there's all these other movies that came out that year.
It's one of those years where, all the time, like, probably like the past 5 years or however long they've been doing it now, it's like, really, do we need 9 Best Pictures?
Yeah.
It's like, and then you look at some of them and you're like, well, you could have easily lost that and we could have just dropped it down to 5 or 4.
Yeah. I remember when they made the jump to 10, and it was one of the worst years for movies, and it was just like, and the winner is
something.
That one, yay! And even the people there are like, it wasn't that great.
But this is one of those years. It's like, okay, so you have The Wizard of Oz, you have Gone with the Wind, you have Stagecoach, you have, we're forgetting something. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Oof, man.
And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's also crazy to think that, so John Ford, this is 1939. 1940, he does The Grapes of Wrath. 1941, he does How Green Was My Valley, which ironically takes Best Picture away from Citizen Kane. And then, like 42, he does, I forget. But he had this run where it was just like,
bam, 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 bam. He's an auteur, man. He's an artist. He knows how to make a picture.
And this is like what Jaws is to the monster movie, this was to the Western.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those rare cases where it's like, it's not every day where you can look at a film and say, it's a commercial success as well as an artistic success. And those two rarely marry.
Yeah.
And there it is.
Yeah. He is known for photographing landscapes so perfectly. And he does it flawlessly in this film, shooting in Monument Valley for the first time. No one had ever been there. He was actually persuaded to shoot there by a man named Harry Golding, who brought forward over 100 photographs of Monument Valley and vowed to camp outside his house until he saw him, which John Ford was just like, no, come in. And he just fell in love with it. And not only that, he cast a bunch of locals from the area, Navajo, who were living there, and was able to boost the economy, which was failing. People were, destitute, and the population was dwindling because everybody was leaving. And then he comes in and he makes this huge movie and casts all these people in it and revitalizes the area.
You just made my dad very happy.
Why? Because I knew that?
Because, well, he knew that, but then he went to Monument Valley 2 years ago.
Oh, nice.
And learned all of that information, and that was a phone call with me. It's like, did you know that he? I'm like, yeah, Dad.
Yeah. I read IMDb, Dad.
but But yeah, I mean, that was watching it on Sunday because, you know, I'm about to go make a road movie, and you know that I want to get these great landscape shots of the car going across the way. And watching this, it was like I could see his love of the land in those shots.
Oh yeah.
Like I could see it was like, oh, he loved the fact that he had this big grand landscape for the first time.
Yeah, man.
And that he could just go and just get these shots of the stagecoach going across or the cavalry going across.
Hey, if you ever want to shoot your Days of Heaven out on the plains of Colorado and get those big blue skies with those crazy thunderheads coming through, just find us you find us some financing and we'll be there. And we have a house we can stay in too.
Sweet.
Thanks, parents. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, driving down those highways and getting those shots, and to try to make something that looks like a John Ford film would be so much fun. Even if, you know, we don't have the lenses and we don't have the colors and all that other stuff, to just be like, this feels like John Ford would be dope.
Because at the end of the day, like, you just, you know, it's not about having the right lens. It's not about having the right camera and all the stuff and all the money and all the, it's about knowing that the giddiness that he felt of just setting up the shot and being like, look how amazing this looks. And oh my God, I'm out here in this land recording this.
Yeah.
That's the, I mean, outside of all like the lessons that this movie holds, and the, you know, the fact that it's just a movie from beginning to end that is just so damn entertaining, and that, you know, just like The Wizard of Oz or like The Adventures of Robin Hood, you sit down and you start it and it's like you're not going anywhere. Like you want to watch it.
Yeah.
And even people who are like not into Westerns or not into old movies or not into John Wayne.
This will get you into John Wayne.
This will get you way into it.
Because he's not the Duke in this. He's just a guy who's got a mission. He's got a personal mission to find this guy who murdered his brother. And it isn't even like an over-the-top revenge story. That's also what's great about it, because revenge stories can be very one note of, I'm going to get this guy, I'm going to kill him, and then everything's going to be great again. He never once says, killing this guy will solve anything.
Right.
He's just like, no, I need to get revenge for my brother. But it isn't a revenge movie. That's just a subplot within this multi-layered story about people who are together. And that's the coolest part.
And the fact that you have this big, gigantic, rip-roaring set piece of this chase and this raid, and that's not the end of the movie.
No.
That scene is so grand, and at the end of it, we keep going.
We still have more story to tell.
And it doesn't feel anticlimactic at the end of it. It doesn't feel like, oh, okay, really, we have, okay. And that the way that is done, the way him coming into the town, we meet his the villains. What's his name?
Luke.
Luke.
My brother.
Sorry. So we meet Luke and his two cronies. They're at the bar, and then the lovely Doc comes in, and he's going to go out with the rifle. And Doc stands in his way, and then says, I'm going to try you for murder. I'm going to bring you up on charges of murder if you go out there with that rifle. So he puts the rifle down, walks out, and then the bartender comes over and he has the great line, don't ever let me do that again.
Because he's a reformed man.
Yes.
He's a hero.
Yes.
He is the hero of this movie.
And then you have, John Wayne has to have his goodbye to Dallas and say, I got this, there's something that I got to do. And we have all of this build up to it. We have all this build up to, okay, there's a gunfight that's going to happen. It's going to be a big deal. We're going to bury some people today.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be this fight. And at the moment that it happens, he's walking, then he drops, shoots the gun, and then we cut back to her. And then we just
focus on her.
And we just focus on her. And then
brilliant storytelling, because the audience will then create it in their mind.
Yeah.
Also, it's 1939, so you can't have that much violence.
Right.
Having him shoot at unseen people behind camera, cut away to reactions. You imagine the blood, you imagine him spinning around, you imagine all of that. But you don't need to see it, and that way it's personal to each individual viewer of what they think happened.
Right.
And it's Jaws. It's don't show, because it's always scarier.
And then you can build the suspense of,
did he make it?
Did he make it? And then Luke walks into the bar and you're like, oh no.
Oh no.
And then he falls and you're like, okay.
He falls face first into a spittoon too, which I was like, oh, that's unfortunate.
And then you have the moment where it's not what would happen, but it's what you want to happen.
It's a romantic ending.
Yes.
And you're fine with it because it's not heavy-handed. It's not like, oh, shucks, get out of here, kid. You think that they're taking him away. And then off the carriage goes with the two of them, and they're just like, well, because he also doesn't want to take him in. That's something that's, kind of refreshing about the Old West justice is he's wanted for escaping, and he's escaping to get his vengeance. So once he's done that, his only crime was escaping. Why did he go to jail? Do they ever say? I don't remember. I don't remember what he's in prison for.
I was trying to think of that too, because I was trying to think of it was that he is an outlaw in the sense that I want to say that he robbed something, but then again I don't, because then he would be equated to the banker.
Right.
So
I can't remember what he was in prison for, but he gets out, and his goal is to kill Luke. So he did that, and the marshal's like, well, I guess that's done.
Right.
Enjoy Mexico.
You know what that is? It's because Spielberg loves this movie so much, and knowing that he probably watched it a lot when he was making Jaws. But what that is to me is that is Richard Dreyfuss coming up and being alive, and then swimming over to Brody, and then the two of them swimming back on the...
Yeah.
It's like it's just an ending that you want.
Yeah.
Like you want it to be okay.
There's no reason he should be alive, but he is.
Right.
And the two of them can ride off together into the sunset. I have trivia. So I mentioned the treatment of the horses in this film, and westerns in general, just not great. Horses, falling, breaking legs, having to be shot, and all that stuff. And it's not really ever addressed, at least to my knowledge, until we get to Braveheart, where they have mechanical horses, and then in later films where all the horses are CGI. And I will always forgive a CGI horse because that means it's not a real horse.
Right.
Sure, let that be the thing. But they had this device called Running W, which was essentially just a metal clamp on the horse's leg. And the horse would be running at full gallop because, and according to the stunt coordinator on this, you want to keep a horse at a full gallop because then they'll run straight. If they're going any slower, they may meander, try to do something else. But you run them at a full gallop, and then when you get to the point where you want the fall to happen or you want the actor to be shot or whatever, they pull the rope on the horse's leg, and then the horse falls down. Essentially, they just trip the horse.
Yeah.
And it works for the stuntman because you yell action, he knows it's going to happen, and he acts. Well, the horse doesn't. So imagine running as fast as you can, and then somebody just pulls your legs out from under you.
Right.
Yeah, all the horses get injured, and it's a horrible practice. So thank God they stopped doing it. But I always wondered how they did that. And then learning that the horses were injured and killed, I was like, what? No, stop. Stop it, Westerns.
Right.
we already talked about the ceilings, but I noticed that in the first set piece. Like, as soon as you go into a room, you're in a room. Like, you can't see our ceiling because it's way up there, but imagine it at 8 feet. This would feel like a completely different thing, but we're on a set. I thought that was really cool. A local shaman named Hostine Zhao promised John Ford specific cloud formations, and then they happened, which is just like, well, that's awesome.
That's how he does it. There was one where it was just like, there was so much sky in it, and the clouds were just ridiculous. Like, it's
As an
amazing.
East
Every
Coaster,
time I see
man,
it.
you don't know how great those skies are. Anytime. I just need somebody to pay my airfare. Thomas Mitchell quit drinking 2 years prior to this film. And I wonder if he had enough of a problem that he's like, I need to stop. And then he plays this role and he's like, ooh, I can tap into this.
Did he win Best Supporting Actor?
I didn't see. I forgot to look up
He
any
won Best Supporting Actor.
further
Much deserved.
awards for this. Louise Platt, who plays the prudish mom-to-be, said of John Wayne, I think he has the most beautiful buttocks I've ever seen.
There's a shot where he gets into the stagecoach where every time I see it, I'm like, ah, come on.
But if it had been a lady, it would have been a zoom.
Right?
Sexism. It grossed nearly $1 million in 1939. Huge, huge film. And it is based on a French story called Boulet de Suif, which means ball of fat, and I'm sure I said all of those words wrong. But it's set in Normandy during the 1870 Franco-Prussian War.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of awesome. And that's why Westerns are so great. They're versatile. You can tell any story from any time. And so many people use Western tropes in their other stories. You look at anything that's set in space and you can see elements of Westerns. You see anything that's set on the open sea with pirates, and it's the same kind of stuff. Westerns are great. And anybody who says otherwise, I will fight you, young David. I'll fight you.
I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, look who you're talking to. Oh, I don't watch those movies because they're black and white and I can't connect to them. Movies from 1939, I can connect with it perfectly. What I'm saying is I'm dumb, David.
Right, but
I'm dumb.
But that is so. It's awesome that you thought that about yourself.
Of course.
But then sitting down to watch it and you're thinking like, oh my God, I didn't know it was this.
Yeah.
And that these films do still connect with an audience and do still work, and you can steal from them so much.
Yeah. Look at any movie that's out right now. They've stolen from this, and Seven Samurai, and Rashomon, and Citizen Kane, and everybody who's made a movie before. And that's why I don't understand people who want to be filmmakers or want to be screenwriters, and they're like, oh, I don't watch movies. Well, then what are you doing? That's like a doctor being like, oh, I didn't go to medical school.
Right.
Then you're not a doctor. You have to be a student of film to then be a filmmaker.
Right.
Because that's how you get your inspiration. That's where you come up with your ideas. You're like, oh, this is a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I can marry them together, and voila.
And it's and like the problems that, like, sitting down and writing a script, like the problems that you may be facing have been answered.
Yeah, somebody somewhere has come up with a workaround.
And it's just about finding that right, like following the breadcrumbs so much that you find that thing that's like, oh my God, they did this, and here's what they did.
Yeah.
So either I'm gonna, just outright steal it, or
Right.
I'm gonna say, like, they did it this way. What if I did it? What if I just twist it just a little bit and do it this way? That's what's so fun about it, man.
That is what's fun about it, and that's why we're both writing stuff, which I'm very excited about. Final thoughts on old Stagecoach. Aside from it being excellent, and this is a really, really great transfer too.
It's beautiful.
I had read that the negatives were lost, and John Wayne had one of the only prints remaining of it, and it was able to be saved by UCLA, which is great. Oh, I wish I could have read this. The essays in here are I've said it before, but they are worth buying all of these because everything in here is just so smart.
Criterion knows what it's doing, man. And This is Stagecoach is also on Filmstruck, the lovely Filmstruck.
Nice.
So that's actually how we watched it on Sunday, Robin and I. But
Because I had it.
because he had it. But there's some great stuff on here, and one of the greatest is Peter Bogdanovich, ever the John Ford aficionado. He has a great appreciation on here where he talks about the conversations that he's had with John Ford about this film, about John Wayne, about how he makes it. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. It is one of the great American films, and whether you like Westerns or not, whether you like John Ford or not, whether you like John Wayne or not,
There's something in this movie that you will connect with and you will appreciate.
and you will love it. To the point where, when I first showed Robin's, we started with The Searchers, and she's like, I don't think I like John Wayne,
Yeah.
because she didn't like his character in it. And then we watched this.
She's like, oh, there it is.
And she watched him get on the Stagecoach, and she's like, "Oh, I like John Wayne." But
Robin, you perv.
but no, like with this film and with Rio Bravo, it's like there's the John Wayne that everyone fell in love with, and he's just so downright lovable, and he's just so inherently good in this film. Like, he's playing an outlaw,
Yeah.
and from that first moment where he's like, hold it, and the camera rushes in on him, like, you're just like, oh,
We didn't need
there's
that
my
shot.
person.
We didn't need that shot in this film, but it's so good. It's so perfect in that moment. And it even goes out of focus a little bit. Like, you can see that it's even John Ford being like, hey, everyone, look.
Right.
Everybody look at this right now.
And it's like, I know this is technically daunting, and we may not even have the right lenses to do this correctly,
But we're doing it.
We're going to try it. And he doesn't move the camera like that unless it has a dramatic effect.
Right.
And the dramatic effect of that is like, I am ushering in the John Wayne that we're going to know forever.
Yeah.
It's
also kind of cool because you can see this character later in life becoming the character in Quiet Man. Like, you can see the correlation.
Yep.
And it's fun to like think of the John Ford universe like that. But man, I loved it. Loved it. And we got some great stuff coming up, which I am so excited about.
We're going to keep on going. We're going to, I was looking at it, it's like, this is just, it's like a run of great American films.
Yeah.
We did Stagecoach. We're about to do Apocalypse Now. Then we're going to do The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Then we're going to do Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yep.
Then we're going to do The Wizard of Oz.
Yep.
And then we're going to end it with your favorite film, Star Wars.
Star Wars. Which, man, I could talk about Star Wars for a very long time. It's a bummer we only have an hour. But I'm very excited. I haven't seen Apocalypse Now since college, and I've only seen the Redux, so I'm excited to see the regular version. I've never seen Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I've never seen Close Encounters. Like, the rest of these films, aside from Wizard of Oz and Star Wars, I'm really jazzed to see them.
The only thing I ask with Treasure of the Sierra Madre and with specifically with Close Encounters, I was almost going to text Rachel and just be like, just make it special. Just turn out all the lights.
Oh, yeah.
Shut off the phone and just be with the film.
I'm ready. I'm ready to make it happen. Awesome. So if you want to watch this, it is, as he said, available on Filmstruck. It's also available right now on YouTube and Google Play for free, so you can watch it there. And then the usual Amazon, iTunes, Vudu for $3 or $4. But just go get the Blu-ray. It's gorgeous. And you can even see like some of the film imperfections of it, which made me, I was like, oh, I wish I were watching this on such a big screen because it would be so cool.
Man, any way you just watch it. Like, if you're on a bus and you're traveling someplace far, watch it on your phone. I'm not always.
You're going to appreciate it.
You're going to appreciate it no matter whatever venue you see it in. It's going to be great.
And if there's any theaters out there that want to show it and have us talk about it, let us know, because definitely will. Cool, man. All right. Till next time, I'm Lincoln L.Hayes.
I'm David Metzger.
Bye.